Flames on the highway sun had barely dipped beneath the horizon, casting a warm amber glow across the outskirts of Willow Ridge City. Dust swirled in the evening air, settling over tired trees and rusted signposts that lined the neglected stretch of highway. A soft breeze stirred the dry grass that edged the roadside, carrying with it the scent of smoke from distant chimneys and the faint hum of approaching traffic. Lena Morales, a 19-year-old girl with calloused hands and a sun-kissed face, trudged along the side of the highway, her backpack slung over one shoulder. Her shoes, worn thin and scuffed, kicked up little clouds of dust with each step. The weight of the day pressed heavily on her small frame. 8 hours on her feet at Rosie's diner, followed by a 2-hour shift cleaning the back office of a local repair shop. She hadn't eaten since breakfast, but hunger was a familiar companion. Her paycheck for the week was barely enough to cover her grandmother's medicine and the monthly rent for their small, crumbling apartment on Riverside Avenue. Lena's body ached, but she didn't complain. She never did. Her grandmother had raised her with a quiet strength, and Lena had learned early on that life didn't owe anyone kindness. You earned your peace through grit, not tears. She took a deep breath of the cooling air, trying to shake the fatigue from her limbs as the last of the daylight faded. Just as she rounded a bend in the road where the highway narrowed near a line of sloping trees, a sound shattered the quiet. Tires screeching against asphalt, followed by the unmistakable crash of metal against metal. Lena froze. The screeching was close, far too close. Her eyes scanned the road ahead, then she saw it, a black SUV. No, something far more expensive. A luxury vehicle had veered off the road, flipped onto its side, and slammed into the base of a tree. Smoke billowed from under the hood, thick and black, curling into the sky like a signal of distress. One of the wheels spun uselessly in the air. The impact had bent the car nearly in half. The front end crumpled and glass shattered across the road. Without thinking, Lena dropped her bag and ran. Her legs pumped against the cracked asphalt as she approached the wreckage. Heat rolled off the engine as flames began to lick their way along the side of the car. She could hear the hiss of gas leaking, the ticking of cooling metal, and then a sound that tore straight through her heart. A child's cry that it was faint, barely audible, but it was there, coming from inside the burning vehicle. Help! Help! A small voice whimpered from the back seat. Lena didn't hesitate. She dropped to her knees beside the shattered passenger window and peered inside. The driver's side was caved in completely, but the back seat still had space. A young boy, no more than 7 years old, was buckled in, his face streaked with tears and soot. His small hands were pressed against the glass, his body trembling in fear. Hey, sweetheart. I'm here, Lena said, her voice calm despite the adrenaline surging through her veins. I'm going to get you out, okay? Just stay still. She tried the door handle, but it was jammed. Without a second thought, she grabbed a large rock from the roadside and smashed it against the window, again and again, until the glass gave way in a rain of shards. Reaching through, she unlocked the door and tugged it open with all her strength. The metal groaned, resistant, but finally relented. The boy was coughing now, the smoke growing thicker, darker. Lena reached in, cutting her arm on the remaining shards, and unbuckled his seatbelt. He was light in her arms, nearly limp, and she cradled his head protectively as she pulled him out of the wreckage. Just as she stepped back, flames whooshed from the front of the car, climbing the hood and licking toward the gas tank. Lena didn't stop to look back. She wrapped her body around the boys and ran, her legs moving without permission from her brain, purely driven by instinct. 30 yards from the car, a deafening explosion erupted behind them, shaking the ground and sending a ball of fire into the sky. Lena stumbled and fell to her knees, shielding the boy with her own body as debris rained around them. She couldn't hear anything for a moment, just a ringing in her ears. Her hands trembled as she checked the boy's face. He was breathing, coughing, but awake. His terrified eyes stared into hers, and he whispered, "Thank you," before she could respond. Another voice shouted through the fading noise, a deep, panicked voice. Footsteps pounded against the pavement. "Leo," the man cried. "Leo." Lena looked up to see a man in a dark suit sprinting toward them, his face pale with fear. He dropped to his knees beside her and pulled the boy into his arms. "Oh my God, Leo. Are you okay? Are you hurt?" His voice cracked as he hugged the child tightly. "Daddy," the boy murmured, clinging to him. The man looked up at Lena, his eyes wide with disbelief and something else, something deeper. Gratitude, shock. "Or, did you pull him out?" he asked breathlessly. Lena nodded, her own hands shaking. Now that the danger had passed, the car, it was going to explode. "I heard him crying." The man's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. He looked over his shoulder at the smoking ruin of the vehicle, then back at the girl before him, covered in soot, her clothes torn, blood trickling from her arm, yet kneeling there with a quiet, unshakable calm. Paramedics arrived moments later, sirens screaming. They rushed to take the boy and check Lena's injuries, but she refused attention until they confirmed that the child Leo would be okay. She watched as the man, still holding his son, spoke urgently with the medics and police.asa, lifted Lyra into the ambulance. The man turned to Lena again. "Wait," he said, stepping toward her. "You saved my son. What's your name?" She hesitated. Lena Morales." He opened his mouth to speak, but she backed away. The flashing lights, the noise, it was all too much. Her nerves were fraying. She felt out of place here, like a ghost in someone else's tragedy. "I have to go," she said softly, already turning to leave. "Wait, please," he called after her. But she was already walking into the dark, disappearing down the road she came from, back at home. Lena slipped through the front door of their apartment as quietly as she could. Her grandmother, Maria, was asleep in the recliner, a crocheted blanket pulled over her frail legs. The small living room smelled faintly of menthol and lavender. Lena tiptoed past, washing the blood from her arms in the tiny bathroom sink and bandaging the cuts with the last of their first aid supplies. Her clothes smelled of smoke, her throat raw from the fire's fumes, but she didn't wake her grandmother. Instead, she sat by the window, staring at the moon and wondering if what had just happened was real. She hadn't saved him because she expected a reward. She hadn't even known who he was. She just couldn't have lived with herself if she had walked away. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that the man she'd left behind on that highway wasn't just any father. He was Alexander Rain, the billionaire owner of Rain Enterprises, a man whose face graced magazine covers, who moved markets with a single decision, and who had the world at his feet. And now, the girl who had saved his only son had vanished. No last name, no address, no phone number. Only the image of her soot-streaked face and trembling hands remained burned in his memory. What Alexander Rain didn't know yet was that Lena Morales wasn't just going to vanish from his life. She was about to change it forever. The billionaire's eyes. Alexander Rain stood alone in the hallway of St. Martin's private hospital, his expensive Italian shoes clicking faintly against the sterile tile floor. His hands were shoved deep into the pockets of his black tailored coat. But he didn't feel the cold. His body was still running on the adrenaline and shock from the night before. Just hours ago, his world had almost come to a crashing, burning halt. His son, Leo, was stable now, sleeping peacefully in the pediatric ward with nurses rotating in shifts to monitor him. Aside from minor smoke inhalation and bruises, he was going to be okay. But Alexander's mind couldn't let go of the moment he had seen that young woman carrying his son away from the flames. She wasn't a firefighter, not a passerby with a phone in hand. She had no uniform, no protection, nothing, but a desperate courage that had driven her right into a fire to save a stranger's child. Her hair had been tangled and singed at the ends, her clothes blackened with soot, and blood had trickled down her arm where she must have torn it open on glass or metal. But her eyes, those eyes were steady, calm, and full of a strange quiet strength that haunted him now. He remembered her name, Lena Morales. He had tried to stop her as she walked away into the night, but she had disappeared like smoke. No contact number, no address. She had refused attention, even gratitude. Just saved his son and walked off. Now, Alexander Rain, a man whose staff could get him anything with a call, was using all his resources to find her. By morning, he had summoned Eliot Carson, his long-trusted head of security. Eliot had been with Alexander since the earliest years of the company, a former intelligence officer with a taste for quiet precision. If anyone could find Lena Morales, it was him. Run everything, Alexander had said, pacing across his office while the skyline of the city glimmered beyond the glass windows. Traffic cameras, police reports, hospital records. Someone must have seen where she went after the accident. She refused medical treatment, sir, Eliot confirmed, holding a tablet. But we got a positive ID from a traffic cam just 10 minutes before the crash. Facial recognition gave us a partial match. Name, Lena Morales, 19 years old. Works 2 part-time jobs in Willow Ridge. No criminal record. Lives with her grandmother in a rundown apartment on Riverside. Alexander's brows furrowed. That name again. Lena Morales. It sounded soft, unassuming, but it now echoed like thunder in his mind. I want to know everything, Alexander said, his voice firm. Not in a threatening way. I need to understand who she is. What kind of person does something like that, then walks away like it never happened? Eliot tilted his head, intrigued. You think she wants something, sir? Alexander looked out the window, pausing before he spoke. I think she wants nothing, and that's what troubles me. Meanwhile, Lena was sitting at the bedside of her grandmother, Doa Maria, spoon-feeding her soup in their tiny kitchen. The apartment was old, the paint on the walls peeling in places, but Lena kept it clean and warm. The hum of a small fan filled the silence. You're quiet today, Mija, her grandmother murmured, her voice raspy. Something happened. Lena smiled gently. Just tired. A long shift? She hadn't told her grandmother about the accident. Not the burning car. Not the little boy. and certainly not the billionaire who had shouted after her. What was the point? Their lives were so far removed from that world. It would sound like a dream or a lie. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear and began cleaning up the dishes. But her mind replayed the scene over and over again: the heat, the child's cries, the explosion, and the man in the dog suit whose face had crumpled in relief the moment he held his son. It hadn't felt heroic at the time. It had just felt necessary. Why the next afternoon, her world shifted again. Lena was taking out the trash behind Rosie's diner when a sleek black car pulled up at the curb. Out stepped a sharply dressed man, tall, clean-shaven, and carrying a briefcase. He looked completely out of place in this one-down part of town. "Lena Morales?" he asked with a calm, professional voice. She hesitated, her fingers tightening around the trash bag. "Who's asking?" "My name is Elliot Carson. I work for Alexander Rain." Her stomach twisted. That name. She knew it now. After the crash, she'd seen news reports and clips online of the billionaire and his company. He was one of the wealthiest men in America: oil, tech, banking, even aerospace. And she had unknowingly saved his only son. "I'm not in trouble, am I?" she asked cautiously. "No, not at all," Elliot said. "Mr. Rain would like to thank you in person. He insists." "I don't need thanks," she muttered. "It was just, please," Elliot interrupted, gently but firmly. "He won't rest until he sees you." An hour later, Lena sat stiffly in the back of a luxury car as it weaved through the heart of the city. She felt completely out of place. Her jeans were torn, her hands still bore scratches, and the man beside her hadn't said a word since they left. Skyscrapers gleamed like silver monoliths outside her window. When they reached Rain Tower, a 60-story masterpiece of glass and steel, Lena stared up in disbelief. The lobby was quiet and full of marble. A soft piano played in the background. Businessmen and women in expensive suits walked past without glancing at her. They took her to the top floor. Alexander Rain stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, his back turned, gazing out at the city like a man burdened by too much. When he turned around, his expression softened instantly. "Lena," he said simply. She stood awkwardly by the door, unsure what to say. "You're even braver than I remember," he added, walking toward her. "Most people would have run. You ran toward the fire. I just heard him crying," she murmured. "I couldn't leave him." He paused in front of her, his eyes studying every bruise, every mark on her arms, every trace of exhaustion on her young face. "You didn't have to, but you did." She shrugged, unsure what to say. "I owe you my son's life," Alexander said. "But more than that, I owe you the truth." Lena blinked, confused. "The truth?" "I'm not going to pretend like we're equals," he said. "I have more money than I can spend in 10 lifetimes. I can buy anything. But what I saw the night what you did, money can't buy that." She looked away, embarrassed. "So, I want to help," he continued. "Let me." "I don't want money," she said quickly. "I know," he said with a small smile. "That's why you deserve more." He walked over to a desk and picked up an envelope. "I did a background check on you. I'm sorry if that feels invasive, but I had to know who saved my son. You live in poverty, Lena. You've been holding your family together alone since you were 15. Her cheeks turned red. "It's just life. You deserve better," he said. "Inside this envelope is a scholarship. Full ride. Any college. Anywhere. Tuition. Housing. Everything. In your name." Lena's mouth opened, but no sound came. "There's more," he added. "Your grandmother's medical bills. Covered. A trust in her name. And if you ever want work, real work. Not waiting tables. My company's doors are open." Lena clutched the envelope, but didn't open it. Her hands trembled. "Why are you doing all this?" Alexander's voice dropped. "Because I've spent decades surrounded by liars, opportunists, and cowards. And last night, I saw a girl who didn't flinch when the world caught fire. There was silence between them, deep, pulsing silence. I want to lift you up," he said finally. "Not because I pity you, but because you're the kind of person this world needs in higher places." Lena stared down at the envelope. The weight of it felt like the weight of a new life. But her mind buzzed with uncertainty. What would happen next? Could she really accept all this? Her story was just beginning, and the world, especially Alexander's world, was about to change because of it. The invitation that changed everything 3 days following Lena's visit to the top floor of Rain Tower passed like a strange, quiet storm full of change, but wrapped in silence. The scholarship envelope sat untouched on the nightstand next to her bed, the crisp paper both promising and intimidating. Her grandmother, D.O.E. Maria, noticed Lena's strange quietness, how she would stare off into the distance after coming home from her shifts, how she would pause with her hand over her chest as if holding in an invisible weight. Then came the knock on the door. It was early evening. Lena had just finished washing dishes when 3 soft raps echoed through their apartment. Wiping her hands on a towel, she opened the door to find a woman standing there in a smart navy blue blazer, a tablet in one hand and an envelope in the other. Lena Morales? She asked with a kind smile. Yes, I'm here on behalf of the Rain Foundation. I've been sent to deliver a formal invitation. An invitation? Yes. Mr. Rain is hosting a private event this Saturday evening, an honorary ceremony recognizing individuals who have demonstrated exceptional bravery. You've been chosen as a special guest of honor. Lena's mouth opened slightly, caught between protest and disbelief. I don't think I can go. I don't belong at something like that. The woman smiled, sensing the hesitation. Transportation will be provided, and we'll have a dress ready for you. Everything's taken care of, Mr. Rain insisted. Lena looked past the woman to the hallway. A man in a black suit stood discreetly near the stairwell, likely the driver. The formality of it all made her stomach twist with anxiety. But she also remembered Alexander Rain's eyes, how they hadn't been cold, like she expected from a billionaire, but warm, even wounded. Maybe, she thought, she owed him this much. She nodded. Okay, I'll go, when Saturday arrived. The apartment was buzzing with quiet excitement. DOE Maria helped Lena get ready, though her hands trembled with age. A long navy blue gown with delicate silver embroidery had been sent ahead of time, along with silver shoes and a set of pearl earrings. Lena had never worn anything so fine in her life. Look at you, her grandmother whispered, tears welling in her eyes. You look like a queen. Lena turned to the mirror, barely recognizing herself. Her hair, usually tied back, now framed, her face in soft waves. Her eyes looked larger, more curious. The dress clung perfectly, transforming her lean figure into something elegant. And yet beneath the glamour, her hands still bore tiny scars from the rescue, a reminder of who she truly was. The black car arrived on time and whisked her away through the evening traffic into the heart of the city. The towering skyline of Willow Ridge glowed against the twilight, and as they passed through a private security checkpoint, the gates of Rain Estate opened before her. She had never seen anything like it. The estate was like something out of a fairy tale. Grand white marble steps, golden chandeliers glowing through massive windows, fountains dancing under spotlights, and people in gowns and tuxedos gathered beneath a canopy of stars. Valets opened doors. A live string quartet played in the garden, and servers floated by with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres she couldn't even pronounce. When Lena stepped out of the car, all heads turned. Whispers fluttered through the air. She didn't know what they were saying, but she could feel it in the eyes that followed her curiosity, judgment, maybe even disbelief. She clutched the edge of her dress nervously. Then she saw him. Alexander Rain stood at the top of the stairs, dressed in a classic black tuxedo, his salt and pepper hair neatly combed, and his sharp features softened by the smile that broke across his face as he saw her. He descended the steps quickly, not waiting for introductions. Lena, he said warmly, offering his hand. I'm so glad you came. I almost didn't, she admitted, her voice quiet. I would come looking for you myself, he said, half joking. Tonight is about you. He led her inside the mansion. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, and walls were lined with artwork that likely cost more than her entire building. But Lena barely noticed. Her mind buzzed with uncertainty, not because of the luxury, but because of how out of place she felt. Alexander introduced her to several guest donors, CEOs, politicians, people who all smiled politely, but looked at her with subtle skepticism. She was just a girl from the poor side of town. What was she doing among them? She's the reason my son is alive, Alexander told them firmly, silencing any doubt in their eyes. As the evening progressed, a hush fell over the ballroom as Alexander stepped onto the small stage at the center. A spotlight glowed, and the room turned toward him. Ladies and gentlemen, he began. Tonight is not about business or status. It's about courage. It's about the moments that define who we are when everything else is stripped away. He paused, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on Lena. Last week, my son Leo was trapped in a burning vehicle. I wasn't there when it happened. I was late. And if it hadn't been for one stranger, I might have lost him forever. Gaspers rippled through the crowd. That stranger didn't wear a uniform. She wasn't trained. She wasn't asked. She risked her life without hesitation, and she asked for nothing in return. He gestured to Lena. Lena Morales, will you join me? She froze. Dozens of eyes turned to her. Her heart pounded. But slowly, she walked toward the stage, every step heavy with uncertainty. When she stood beside Alexander, the applause that followed was not polite, it was thunderous. He turned toward her, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. In honor of her bravery, he said, and on behalf of the Rain Foundation, I present to Lena Morales the gold emblem of human valor, an award given only 5 times in the history of this company. Inside the box, nestled in satin, was a gold medallion shaped like a phoenix rising from flame. Hair stuck Lena's eyes, not from pride, but disbelief. She had never imagined being honored for doing what felt simply right. Then Alexander raised his hand again. And there's more. The crowd fell silent once more. As of tonight, Lena will receive a full academic scholarship, housing support, and a monthly stipend until she completes her degree wherever she chooses to study. And should she wish, a position at Rain Enterprises awaits her. Lena's hand flew to her mouth. The room erupted again. Later that evening, after the event had quieted, and the guests had retreated to the garden or departed in luxury cars, Lena stood on the balcony overlooking the estate. The night breeze cooled her flushed cheeks. She needed air, time to think. Her mind was overwhelmed not just by the gifts or attention, but by the implications. She had stepped into another world. "I hope I didn't embarrass you," Alexander said, joining her with 2 glasses of water instead of wine. "You didn't." I don't know how to react to any of this." "I know it's a lot," he said, "and I know you're not the kind of person who wants the spotlight." She nodded. "I just wanted to help a child. That's all. And you did. You saved him. But maybe there's more to it than just that." She turned to him, confused. "What do you mean?" He leaned on the balcony railing beside her, looking out at the garden. "I've built companies, fortunes, legacies. But tonight, I realized something. None of it matters if I can't recognize true value when I see it." She blinked, unsure of what he was suggesting. "You belong here, Lena," he said quietly. "Not because of charity, but because people like you are rare. You see beyond yourself. You act without ego. You make choices from the heart. That's the kind of person I trust with everything I've built." The wind stirred the silk of her gown. Lena swallowed hard. "I'm not ready for that kind of world," she admitted. "No one ever is," he said gently. "But some of us grow into it. I think you're one of them." She looked up at him, uncertain but grateful. There was a warmth in his gaze that made her heart ache, not romantic, not possessive, but human, deep and genuine. And in that moment, for the first time since the fire, she believed that maybe, just maybe, her life was changing for something greater, not for the money, not for the title, but for the opportunity to become someone who could rise from ashes just like the medallion she now wore. Her journey wasn't over. It was just beginning. A new life. A new Lena Morales sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the letter in her hands. The seal of Stanford University gleamed under the sunlight filtering through the curtain. Her fingers trembled as she reread the words for the 3rd time. "We are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted." She'd known this day was coming ever since she submitted her application, aided by Alexander Rain's private educational advisors. Still, seeing it officially, in writing, left her stunned. She glanced across the room to where her grandmother, Doa Maria, rested in her favorite chair. The old woman, still recovering from the flu, opened her eyes and smiled faintly when she saw Lena holding the letter. "So," her voice rasped. "I got in," Lena whispered. "Full ride. All of it." Maria's eyes glistened with tears, and she reached out, her frail hand trembling. Lena took it, feeling the warmth and wisdom that had carried them both through years of hardship. "You're going to fly now, and you were born for more than this life." Though Maria's voice was gentle, her words weighed heavily in Lena's chest. She had never dreamed of Stanford. In fact, she had barely dared to dream at all. Yet here she was, standing on the edge of a brand new life, one that had been opened not by privilege or pedigree, but by an act of pure instinctive bravery, and by the unexpected kindness of a billionaire who'd refused to let her disappear into anonymity. Weeks passed like a blur. Lena moved into the university housing on campus, surrounded by bright minds and polished young students from powerful families. Her dorm room was modest, but to her, it felt like a palace. For the first time, she had her own desk, her own lamp, her own quiet space to study. She decorated the walls with photos of her grandmother and added a tiny potted plant that she named Sol. Despite the beautiful campus, the cheerful professors, and the prestige of being a Stanford student, Lena felt like a shadow walking through sunlight. Many of the students she met were kind, curious, and open, but others weren't as welcoming. Whispers followed her in the corridors. "She's that girl, right? The one Rain made a project out of. Doesn't belong here. Just some lucky charity case. Maybe she's just his." You know, those words sat deeper than she expected. They weren't spoken loudly, but the insinuation hung in the air like poison. People speculated about her relationship with Alexander Rain. They whispered that she must have done more than just save his son. Some believed she had seduced him. Others thought he had adopted her as some sort of PR stunt. None of it was true. But the truth rarely mattered in places built on perception. One day after class, Lena walked past the business library and overheard a small group of students, two girls in designer blazers and a guy with slicked back hair laughing. "Did you see her shoes? Probably second-hand. Can't fake class," one of the girls sneered. "Doesn't matter how many scholarships you get. Some people don't belong in this world." Lena didn't confront them. She simply kept walking. But that night, she cried for the first time since the night of the fire. Not because of the cruelty, but because she was terrified they might be right. What if she didn't belong here? What if this world was too far from where she came from? It was during one of those low moments that she received an unexpected message. Need to talk. Come to Rain Tower. When she arrived at the top floor the next evening, Alexander greeted her not with suits and grandeur, but with coffee and silence. He handed her a warm mug, gestured toward the long glass wall, and waited until she'd spoken. I feel like I'm being measured all the time, Lena finally said, her voice soft. Like I'm not good enough to be here, like everyone's. Waiting for me to mess up, Alexander didn't speak for a moment. Then he said, "Let me tell you something no one told me when I was your age." She looked up. This world isn't fair, and it doesn't reward truth the way it should. But the most dangerous people in power are the ones who believe they deserve it more than anyone else. Lena furrowed her brow. And sure, you don't need to prove you belong, Lena, he continued. You already did that the night you walked into the fire. The people whispering about you, they're terrified, because they see someone who didn't need wealth or pedigree to matter, and they can't control that. His words sat with her long after she returned to campus. She began carrying herself differently, not arrogantly, but with quiet confidence. She focused on her studies, slowly building friendships with students who cared more about character than lineage. One of them, a tech major named Yasmin, became her closest companion. She was funny, sharp-tongued, and unafraid to clap back at anyone who made a snide comment. With Yasmin by her side, the whispers didn't sting as much. Meanwhile, her relationship with Alexander and Leo Rain quietly deepened. She would often spend weekends visiting Leo, who had recovered completely and now insisted on calling her my guardian angel. The boy clung to her like a sister, and Alexander, though always composed, grew visibly softer around her. Interactions remained formal at first, but over time, a strange and tender dynamic developed between them. Alexander began asking her thoughts on real matters, business ethics, social outreach, and how Rain Enterprises could better serve struggling communities. Lena, though unsure at first, spoke honestly, and Alexander listened. It was during one of these visits, while walking with Leo through the gardens behind the estate, that Lena noticed something odd. A group of sharply dressed men speaking urgently with one of Alexander's advisors. They kept glancing her way. Later that evening, Alexander called her into his study. His jaw was tight, eyes sharper than usual. I need to tell you something, he said, and I need you to hear all of it. Lena nodded, sensing the weight behind his voice. There are people in my company, board members, investors, who don't like how close I've become to you. They think helping you reflects badly on me, that it makes me look vulnerable. Lena stayed quiet. One of them leaked false rumors to the media, he continued. They're trying to spin the story that you're manipulating me, that your scholarship is a scandal. Some are even threatening to pull out if I don't cut ties with you. Lena's breath caught. Then maybe you should. Alexander stood, suddenly looking every bit like the billionaire the world feared. No, I won't. You don't owe me anything, she said, her voice cracking. No, he agreed, walking around the desk. But I owe the world the truth. I built this empire on the backs of people. I'll never meet people who gave everything and got nothing. You gave everything, Lena. And you asked for nothing. If I let them erase you, then I failed. Tears welled in her eyes, but she held them back. What happens now? I want you to speak at the annual Rain Summit next month, he said, in front of shareholders, partners, the media. I want them to see you, hear you, not as a symbol, but as a voice. Your own voice. Lena froze. I've never spoken in front of a crowd like that. Alexander smiled softly. Good. That means you'll speak from the heart. The night of the summit arrived with a cold wind and a sky full of stars. Lena stepped onto the stage at the Rain Enterprises auditorium. 1,000 eyes fixed on her. Cameras rolled. Executives leaned forward. Alexander sat in the front row beside Leo. She cleared her throat. My name is Lena Morales, she began. You don't know me. Most of you never would have. I grew up poor. I've cleaned floors, waited tables, slept in a room with broken windows. But last year, I saw a car crash. I heard a child cry, and I ran into fire. The room held its breath. I didn't do it because I'm brave. I did it because I couldn't imagine not doing it. Because some of us grow up knowing that life doesn't wait. That if we don't act, no one will. She paused, her voice steady. I'm standing here not because of luck, but because someone chose to see me. Someone chose to lift me, not as a charity case, but as a person with worth. And I believe that's what true power is, not wealth, not titles, but the choice to lift others when they can't reach. When she finished, the room erupted in applause, not polite, but genuine. Later, as the crowd dispersed, Alexander approached her quietly. You didn't just speak, he said. You changed something. She turned to him. Thank you for believing in me. He shook his head. Thank you for reminding me what it means to believe. Lena's life didn't magically become perfect after that. There were still Critics, still doubters. But now she had something far more powerful than fame or fortune. She had her own voice. She finished her first year at Stanford with top marks. She began working part-time with the Rain Foundation, creating a scholarship for women from underprivileged backgrounds. She visited her grandmother often, calling her every night without fail. And every once in a while, she'd walk by the campus pond alone and whisper to herself, "I'm still Lena." But she was also something more now. A student, a leader, a survivor, a woman who once ran into fire and emerged unburned.